thank you. I usually don't have a trouble with volume, so I should be able to do that. Sometimes I have trouble speaking too quickly, so you can wave at me if I start. When I was first ordained, there was an old retired priest who came one time, and after Mass he said, "I know you're enthused, but slow down up there, will you?" So I can get going sometimes. So thank you. It's great to see a lot of new faces and a lot of familiar faces. It's great to be here. I did not one day think, I should write about demons. That wasn't how the book came about. With Joe Hebert's encouragement, and talked to him on the phone several times, if you remember that, Joe, about going back to school. After I left St. Mary's in Rock Island, I was transferred to St. Francis Hospital in Peoria and started taking some counseling classes at Bradley University. They had a program there, you could get a master's degree in counseling, so I got that. While I was getting that, I have a friend, a priest I've known for probably 15, 20 years, Father Chad Ripperger. Some of you might know that name. He actually is no secret, he actually is an exorcist. He used to teach in the Fraternity of St. Peter Seminary. And he also has a great psychology background from St. Thomas Aquinas. I'm only a little bit with St. Thomas. He was great with him. But on the phone a couple times, he said he'd been consulted because of that psychology background on difficult cases where someone might or might not be possessed by demon. I said, "Oh, really? Well, how do you sort that out?" So it was a few of those conversations while I was taking counseling classes. So I finished a master's degree and was able to go on for a PhD, a lot of it online, but I would go out each summer to Virginia Beach, where the school was, Regent University. And then it was a non-denominational Christian university, so even though they were not Catholic, they were open to that idea that a person could be possessed, and I was still thinking about that on and off, like, well, how would you sort that out? So I ended up finding an instructor who was more than willing to be the head of my dissertation committee. He needed 3 instructors to be on that. And so the title of the dissertation was, "How do Catholic exorcists distinguish between demon possession and mental disorder?" So what makes them look at someone and say, you know what, this person does not have some severe mental health problem, this person is possessed by a demon. What makes them say that? So the dissertation was heavier on the mental health aspect because it was a degree in counseling. And when I submitted the work to Catholic Answers and we went back and forth, and as far as I learned about the publishing process, they cut a fair amount of the mental health part, which at first I was heartbroken. Oh, there was some great, you're thinking it's great stuff. Yeah, Father, it's great stuff. I'm sure that's great stuff for counselors, said Todd, the editor. But you're trying to not just write for counselors. Yeah, you're right. He was right, of course. So it's not as much. There's some mental health things in there, some of the diagnosis and things. But it's heavier on the theology, of course, because it's a Catholic Answers publisher. And it's a book coming from a priest with a mental health background. So that's how the book came about, and that's how the talk came about, basically. That whole thing about a disorder or a demonic attack. The devil is always there in the background. I think the best way to think of the devil is the first way, which is that little serpent there whispering, "Go ahead and do it. It'll be okay. It'll be great. Go ahead." That's what we read in the book of Genesis. I think that's still the most common and the most dangerous way the devil works. Just that little whispering telling us to go ahead and do whatever wrong thing we're considering doing, trying to egg us on. The question always becomes then, to what degree is the devil involved? If he's pretty much always in the background, or at least a lot of times, but we don't want to then think he's always in the foreground, right there doing something dramatic. It's that little thing in the background. But sometimes it gets a little bit difficult to sort out. I remember some years ago, it stuck in my head because it was about the same time I was talking to 2 different young women, both struggling with an eating disorder, anorexia. They weren't eating enough and they were really unhealthy. And getting to know each of them about the same time, and they were both saying roughly the same thing, which was a little bit, whatever, lack of a better word, just a little bit scary. There's just that voice telling me, you know what, you should die, you deserve it. Look what you're doing to yourself, look what you're doing to family, why don't you just die? And they were telling me that they would, how heartbreaking that is. First of all, of course, someone's hurting that badly and seems to be kind of having a struggle knowing they're hurting themselves and unable to stop. Do I think either of them were possessed? No, absolutely not. Was there some greater degree of demon attack rather above temptation? I don't know. I'll get into that a little bit more as we go on here and what to do about it. I'm just not sure. There's those tough cases. Back in the Prohibition days, didn't they sometimes use the phrase demon rum? It sounds kind of comical now, demon rum. And I remember seeing a picture of a bottle of some, alcohol with a little demon coming out of it. It sounds comical, and yet probably everyone has probably known someone who has struggled very terribly with an alcohol problem. I'm thinking of a guy who was there with his wife. The marriage was probably going to be broken up, and he was in tears. He'd been to rehab time and time and time again, like 5, 6, 7 times, I don't know how many times. Really, really wanted to stop, and again, it's almost like, gosh, is the devil really attacking him? So is the devil involved? Yes. How much? That's tough to sort out, but that's what we're kind of looking at and talking about today. Maybe a way to look at it, kind of look at the opposite. A lot of the people here come to Latin Masses. What if you have a great Latin Mass by like Palestrina or Mozart? Let's say Mozart, who wrote like beautiful coronation Mass and Requiem Mass. Well, was that the direct work of the Holy Spirit? Well, no. I mean, it's not like he was writing a gospel. Was God's gift, musical, gifts to Mozart involved? Well, absolutely. I mean, you don't just. I can't write like Mozart. He had some kind of great gift from God for doing that. But we don't want to take that too far and say, gosh, he was inspired by the Holy Spirit. Well, in some way, but we don't want to pretend he was writing gospels. So where is it in between? I don't know. He had some great natural gifts, and I'm sure worked hard with them. How close he was to God, only God knows. So I think if we can look at that positive way of God's influence, what was Mozart? I just picked him out because he's got good music. Great natural gifts, and used them to work very hard. That's aside from whatever the state of his soul was. But he had these great gifts, and he worked tremendously hard with them and came out with this amazing music. So what about the flip side, the mental disorders and the evil? Well, we all have weaknesses as a result of original sin. And like if Mozart was compounding, if he was improving his natural gifts by hard work, we compound our problems of original sin, our weaknesses sometimes with our own sins. Now sometimes it has nothing to do with that. We know we're physically weak because of original sin. We have physical weaknesses. We suffer and die. We can be as virtuous as we want. We can be the greatest thing in the world. We're still going to die. So it's not going to, living a holy life isn't going to cure all those weaknesses from original sin. Baptism, of course, takes care of the spiritual side. It wipes away the original sin, gets us into heaven, but we're still stuck with these weaknesses. Physical, mental, emotional, and weakness of the will. Those are usually the 4 that we say we've got weaknesses as a result of original sin. Holiness can help with the emotional part, because what does that mean? That means we're trying to not lose our temper, trying to be calm, those kind of good things. So it can help with that part. Can holiness help with the physical? Not really. The intellectual, on rare occasion you get these saints who seem to have some infused knowledge. But for a lot of us, just because someone doesn't have a high IQ, we don't want to say, well, they're sinning too much. Well, no, they just didn't have that, that particular gift. So we're kind of stuck with those, and we can make some things worse, especially the emotional part, I think, by our own sins. Physical too, in certain ways, of course. If we're living a good, balanced life, we improve our chances of being healthy. We don't cure things, but certainly, vices, drug abuse and things like that can make the physical part worse. So there's a little interplay there too. Yeah, so even though we reject even if we're in good state of grace, rejecting the devil, we're still going to have these weaknesses and these problems. And those can include the mental problems. A person may be very virtuous. Sometimes I read those lives of the saints. One of my favorite saints is Joan of Arc, and I've seen things, she had schizophrenia because she heard voices. No, I don't think so, because she nearly conquered the English armies in France. But sometimes I read some of the saints who they did seem very extreme, and I wonder if they did have some kind of mental disorder. And if that sounds insulting, it shouldn't. In fact, I think it's the opposite, saying someone with a mental disorder can become a great saint. That doesn't preclude someone from becoming a great saint. It might not cure the mental disorder. Again, just like the physical. So to start then with, that's kind of introduction, to start with demons. What are demons? The creatures that are made in the likeness and image of God are human beings and demons. We'll leave out aliens. I don't know if there are any. C.S. Lewis had that neat book about people on other planets who were in God's likeness and image also. We'll stick with human beings and demons. Intellect and free will. Those are the things that make us like God. Those are the things that angels had too. And if I can go just a little astray to mention a mental health aspect on this, if we see a terrible crime on the news and there's that debate that comes up, and it is a tough one, is this person, so mentally disordered they did not know what they were doing, or are they just really evil to do this? God knows that. We can't always tell, and it's the job of the jury to try and sort it out, because to live in a civilized society, we've got to try and sort out that question, even though we're not going to always get it right. But if we think of those two things, intellect and free will, those are the gifts that we have that separate us from the animals. Intellect, we can use reason. We can reason things out. Animals cannot do that. And yeah, we hear, oh, but my dog's really smart. Your dog doesn't get up in the morning, I changed my mind. I think today instead of going to the gym, they don't think that way. They're not capable of reasoning. They just do what their instinct and their experiences and their senses tell them to do. We also go by experience in the senses and passions, emotions. Instinct, we have a little bit of that as human beings, not that much. The thing that goes into the mix for us is reason that we have over and above the animals. And, as far as mental health, I was just talking about this with Father. I was reading that there's a great insight by Chesterton, I'm sure others have had it too. Too much thinking, we might think, oh, if someone's got mental health problems, they're not thinking enough. Actually, it seems like sometimes mental health problems result from thinking too much. Someone's obsessive compulsive, like they've got to check the door 5 times. What do we want to tell them? Check it once and leave. Quit thinking about it. Someone's depressed. They're oftentimes thinking about all the bad things. I want to tell them, stop thinking about those. Go outside right now. If I'm on the phone, go outside right now. Look at the trees. Take a walk. Feel, is it hot out? Is it cold out? Stop thinking for a while. So actually thinking too much can be a sign of, can be a part of, I should say, being mentally disordered. Mentally disordered does not necessarily mean whatever, off the deep end or whatever derogatory things. It just means we're all disordered, and we want to keep reining that in. We don't want to let our disorders get too much, too far out there, worse than they are. So thinking too much can actually do that. I said depression, obsession, anxiety, same thing. A person who's afraid of almost, I don't want to say phobias, but just, worry about this and worry about that. Stop worrying. Go for a walk. Watch a funny movie. Just stop thinking for a while. So if you know someone with some of those things, what are you usually trying to do? Get them to rein in their intellect because they're overdoing it. There's got to be a balance between reason, the intellect, and the other thing we have that makes us in the image of God is the free will. Choosing. I can look at two things and choose one or the other. And those who try to reduce human beings down to animals would say, well, you weigh everything and however it weighs out, and that's what you end up doing. No, we weigh everything, but in the end, we've got just something in us that we call free will that can, in the end, make the decision. Even if all my experience and passions and everything weigh on the one side, I might say, you know what, I'm going to do this instead. Maybe look at Jesus in the garden. His human intellect was saying, this is a really bad idea, but what did he freely choose as a human being? His human will coincided with his divine will. He said, yes, I'm going to turn myself over to crucifixion. The scary thing about free will, I think this is why it sometimes gets difficult to distinguish, is this person mentally disordered or are they just really evil when they did a terrible crime? What do we mean by that word vice, a habit of sinning? So if I use my free will to sin over and worse sins and never repenting, it doesn't mean I end up insane. Wow, now he's insane because he's doing horrible things to people. Maybe I've just become really evil. So I think the overthinking it, I think that can, if we keep doing that, that can lead to the mental problems worse and worse. But I think the free will choices, I don't think they lead to mental problems. I think they just lead to really good, or to turn around really bad, or to turn around really good. How do you become a saint? You just keep doing good over and repent when you do bad and keep trying to do the good. So I think that's where those two, we can sort those out a little bit, the intellect and the free will. Overdoing the intellect, I think, can lead to the mental disorders. Overdoing the free will, I want what I want, why? Just because I want it, that can end up in very evil. A lot of people involved in a lot of pro-life things here, I'm sure. That, I think, is where that becomes really clear. That's where we get so frustrated. How do we try and convince someone about the evils of abortion? Well, look, we know this is a child by their DNA, and we can show it an ultrasound in so many weeks, and gosh, we've got children born at 23 weeks who survive, and we can. What are we doing? We're using reason. What does the other side say? They tell us what they're using. Pro-choice. They're free will, pure will. They're not using an ounce of reason in that because they throw out all the reasoning we just did and say, yeah, but it's what I choose. What a person chooses. Actually, it's the abortionist doing the choice. We all know that women are going through horrible times with that. But that's why we have such sympathy for them and such kind of revulsion at the abortionist. He's sitting back there cold, calculating how much he's doing this routine thing. Do you ever stop, step back, and think what you're doing there? I don't know if they do. I think they're just in a habit of doing this free will thing. So there we have it. Free will taken to extreme can do horrible things morally. The intellect taken to extreme can lead us to be disordered and worried and think overthink everything. A little bit of St. Thomas Aquinas. A little bit more about demons then. They also have that intellect and free will. Apparently they just kind of use the intellect as they would use anything else just to help them do some evil. But they're really focused on that free will, those evil choices. Their intellect, we think, well, we might not think, but we might see it. Why doesn't God ever forgive the demons? The demons are incapable of being sorry. And why was that? Because those other factors that I said that we have our experiences, we have our passions, which emotions, basically the same thing. We have the five senses. They can entice us to do one thing or the other. Demons don't have those things. They're just pure intellect and will. And so when it came time, St. Thomas Aquinas would say they were created, I love it, in one instant would be an English translation. What length of time is that? It doesn't really matter. That's a mathematical thing to try and break that down. One instant they are created. The next instant they're committed. They're making their choice, angels, to make good or evil. Why don't they ever change it? After a few billion years or whatever, don't they realize it's not working out so well? No, they haven't changed. They knew everything back then that they know now about their choice. What they would be looking at saying, what do you mean change my mind? I knew at that moment I did not want to serve God. Well, I haven't learned anything that makes me, they're never going to learn anything that makes them change that. So that's where demons are. A little louder? No? Okay, thank you. That's where demons are. That's where they were after their creation. They chose evil, and they're still choosing it. And so there's the thought of them repenting. I read something from I think it was a line from a saint, that the angels, this would be the good angels, stand in awe when they see us going into the confessional because we're repenting. The good angels, they have nothing to repent from. But again, it's just outside their experience to do evil and then to be sorry and do good. Wow. Something outside the experience of the good or the bad angels. Of course, we've got all those good ones who never did the evil. Types of demons I'll get into a little bit later, but the only time that anything comes up about are there different types of demons. Well, I guess a couple things. I don't know how doctrinal the 9 choirs of angels are. Certainly a strong Catholic tradition that they're the 9 choirs of angels. We see them in St. Paul and some things like that. Thomas Aquinas presumes that the demons come from all the 9 choirs as well. So in that case, there are different types. But sometimes you'll be reading, maybe if you read on the topic, which I don't encourage too much, the whole thing of demons. Well, we got these different types of demons. Well, the only thing we see of that really in the Bible, in the Gospels, one time when the man was deaf and dumb, the young man, I think was a child, Jesus says, deaf and dumb spirit. It seems that he was just talking about the result that caused. He didn't say that every single time, so one of the Catholic Answers editors was making a joke to me once. He said, the demon of acne, I command you to leave this person. We don't want to attribute every problem to demons. Again, we've got those human weaknesses from original sin, which is indirectly from the demons, but we don't want to make every health and every mental problem a direct assault of the devil. So as far as different types of demons causing different things, I don't know. It certainly could be, but we don't want to pin too much on that. About the only other time in the New Testament, I think, with a type of demon was the Acts of the Apostles, so that would have been St. Luke writing. And there was a young woman who had been following around St. Paul, and she had a clairvoyant spirit. St. Paul drove it out. So some kind of fortune-telling spirit. Again, that was just St. Luke's way of just saying that's what this young woman was doing, because that's what she was doing, fortune-telling. We just don't want to go too far on the different types of demons, because there's nothing in the catechism about it. 2 lines from Scripture, we don't want to build a whole theology on 2 lines from Scripture. So I'll touch more on that, but right now just talking about the demons. Which, by the way, I meant to start the talk with a very important point, which is, when I said we don't want to do too much theology, we don't ever want to make the center of our spiritual life opposition to the devil. The center of our spiritual life should be love of Jesus Christ. And one of the things that results of that is opposition to the devil, that he's our enemy. But never put that front and center. I got to fight the devil all the time. No, I've got to love Jesus Christ all the time. And one part of that sometimes is to be dealing with this guy out here, the devil. But never get that front and center. That's an imbalanced spiritual life. Aquinas, I love this part. Revelation says that God, through that Michael cast the devils down to earth. It doesn't say they went down to hell. Now, certainly they're in hell too, but they're also, I think the point was being made, they're also here on the earth. How do they go back and forth? What does that mean? Very mysterious. They're spiritual beings. And what is hell anyway? That's kind of mysterious to us too. It'll be some kind of a physical place because it's open to having physical human bodies there at the end of the world. But St. Thomas said it doesn't matter where the demons are, they carry hell with them. That's very interesting and very scary thought. They carry hell with them. Why? Because he said, from the beginning, from the moment they sinned, they always oppose God's will everywhere. And even though I think we struggle sometimes to see God at work, because when we're suffering or seeing suffering, God, I know you're there, I just don't see it. I think the angels and devils see it very clearly. So in other words, if you're a demon and you hate God's will, you can be in hell, you can be earth, and you're always seeing God's plan fulfilled all the time, and you hate it. So you're always unhappy, terribly unhappy, no matter if you're in hell or on earth. You're seeing God's will carried out, and that makes you unhappy all the time. Same, the reverse side, of course, with the good angels, whether in heaven or whether they're here on earth protecting us, same thing. They rejoice in God's will. They see God's will happening all the time on earth. In heaven, they're happy everywhere they go. So I love that phrase, they take hell with them. And the good angels, they take heaven with them. So even though they're both here on earth, shouldn't they be about neutral? No. The fallen angels, devils are totally miserable. The good angels, totally in ecstasy. So now we get to, I guess, the demonic attacks. I think the worst, I would tell people definitely, is temptation. How does a person end up in hell? By getting possessed? That might be part of it. That's certainly not the main part. It makes a better movie to show a person getting, snatched and dragged down to hell, but that's not what possession is, and we'll get to that in a minute. But we start with temptation. How do we all end up in hell? That's not what we want. How can a person end up in hell? By giving in to temptations. The devil's not the only source, of course, the flesh and the world. So we've got three sources of temptation. So again, we don't want to attribute it all to the demons. That's specifically in the Catechism of the Council of Trent, to see that mentioned. The temptations of the devil, the flesh, and the world. I guess if I'm thinking of the flesh and the world, what did we used to say? Wine, women, and song, was that some kind of phrase? Those would be the temptations of the world, right? Well, the wine, that would be the temptations of the flesh, actually. Alcohol, drugs, impure, acts, those are all temptations of the flesh. Something that involves my physical body, that my body craves, in a wrong way. Those are temptations of the flesh. Temptations of the world, I guess, fame and fortune would be a way to put it. Don't we all want to be rich and famous? I hope not, but there's that tug there, isn't there? Boy, that'd be great to be rich and famous. No, that's a temptation towards sin. We don't need to be rich or famous. So those are temptations too, the flesh and the world. And then we've got the devil. And it's temptations, giving in, as we all know, repeatedly giving into mortal sins and then not repenting of them. That's the path to hell. So that's why I think temptations are so dangerous, because we give into them, and if we don't repent, and the less we repent, or the more we delay it, the more difficult it is to repent, and that's the path to hell. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding the temptations to the best we can. Now, we're in the world, so the temptations are going to be there. So we try to avoid them the best we can. Try and do prayer and fasting, do prayer and penance to protect ourselves. And needless to say, the sacraments are the most powerful tools to help us resist temptations of whichever source. So that's temptation. Then if we go to the other extreme of demon possession, literally meaning a demon is possessing someone's body. So making them convulse or whatever, moving their body, but also importantly, sometimes moving their vocal cords and speaking for them. So that's what possession is. I think I skipped a part here of the powers of the demons. One of the things demons can do, they can probably manipulate physical matter, so like a human body, but other things as well. So that's why they can maybe seem to do miracles. They're not true miracles, but demons are probably able to move things around. If we want an example from the Bible, in the Old Testament, remember when Moses, God told him to throw down his staff, and then Pharaoh's sorcerers and magicians threw down their staffs, and theirs also appeared to turn into snakes, just like Moses' staff. Now Moses' staff then ate up the others. But apparently those magicians, sorcerers, were they in league with the devil? Probably, because a human being cannot do that. So there's probably something demonic going on there. Demons have the ability, apparently, to manipulate physical things. So that's what they're doing with the physical human body. They cannot see the future the way God can. Only God, sometimes we use the word eternal in two different ways. One way means to live forever. Our soul is eternal. Our soul's always going to be there. The angels and demons are always going to be there. That's one way. When we say God is eternal, we don't only mean that he's always going to be there and that he always was there, but that he's actually outside of time. In other words, God's not really old. We don't want to say, gosh, God is so old, he's been around so long. No, he's outside of time. He's not young or old. It means nothing to him. So he's outside of time. The demons are not like that. The demons are not outside of time. They're not God. So they exist in time. They probably experience it different than we do because they don't have bodies. They're also very smart, and they can also travel around. You know, I was noticing, I almost laugh whenever I see angels depicted as little, it looks so funny, little baby heads with wings. You know, like that's so comical. It's a very good representation, though, if we know what it means. Not that they're going to look like that would probably be frightening. What does it mean? Well, they have intellect and will, like human beings, but what are the wings? Well, the wings represent the fact that they can move from place to place very quickly, almost instantly. So think about a demon then, who, let's say he knows, because he heard me talking to someone and knows what my schedule was, let's say at this meeting here, okay, the devil talks about, sees that I'm going to be up here this week, and he sees that someone else is going to be up here this week. And so there's someone else who's interested in demons, and they go to a psychic, by the way, a week ago, and most psychics are going to say vague things that mean nothing or whatever. I'm not saying they're usually in league with the devil. They're usually getting their $10, and that's all there is to it. It's right up the street from St. Columba Church where I live. $10, it's on the street corner, psychic. Wow, that's a good deal. But once in a great while, if the devil really, and it's not a psychic using a devil, it's the devil using the psychic. The devil's more powerful and smarter than the psychic. So once in a while, if it does seem that a psychic really is getting it right in ways that a human being cannot, it does not mean, boy, they are a really good psychic. No, that means the devil is manipulating them. So back to my example. Suppose someone went to a psychic and they said, oh, you're going to go to that talk and whatever, and you're going to see that, or it's going to, let's say the demons knew two different people, knew their schedule, knew they were both going to meet here. The psychic says, you're going to meet a person named, John Doe. And the person comes and they meet him. Gosh, that psychic could see the future. No, the psychic couldn't. The devil could see the future. No, the devil didn't see the future either. The devil is very smart and gets around a lot. And saw your schedule and put it together. Hey, they're probably going to meet. Now, it's not 100%, but it's pretty likely. I guess I think of the devil as a really, really, really good weatherman. He can see the cold front coming and the warm front and all that stuff and make a great prediction. If you think about it, there's nothing godlike about that the devil can just travel around real fast and listen to what people are saying and look at their schedule. And then he can use some psychic and put the idea in their head and all of a sudden we've got a psychic who can read the future. We've got the devil manipulating some person and the person's getting $10 for it. Not worth it. But that's how the devils can seem to see the future. So, never leave home without your rite of exorcism. Just kidding. I did leave home without it. I had to borrow it. It's in the book, the old book of the Roman ritual, Christian burial, exorcisms, and blessings. So stick with reading the blessings. I don't go over the rite of exorcism much. I did, of course, for the paper, and since then I've not read through it. Why? I don't need to keep looking at it. I'm not an exorcist. I always need to mention that at the beginning. I've assisted a few times, but I'm not an exorcist. By the way, this is written in 1614, so that's the bad old days when the church was really bad and stupid. No, the church was not bad or stupid back then. How about this for something from 1614? And by the way, that's when this was printed. Remember, the printing press had only been around about 100 years by that time, so they were still printing all the church rituals. So this was basically what had been being done for centuries. And what does the church tell the exorcist? He should not believe too readily that a person is possessed by an evil spirit, but he ought to ascertain the signs by which a person possessed can be distinguished from one who is suffering from melancholy or some other illness. Melancholy was, we still use the word sometimes, kind of for depression. It was probably more of a catch-all word just for mentally ill. So isn't that fascinating that way back in the early 1600s, and certainly before that, because the rite was around before it was printed in paper form, the church knew full well, hey, this is going to be kind of tough. You've got to try and distinguish, Father Exorcist, between possession and mental illness because it can be confusing. And so the church goes on. Signs of possession are the following: ability to speak with some facility in a strange tongue, or to understand it when spoken by another. Strange tongue, the exorcists all say, does not just mean babbling, like, making nonsense words and say, oh my gosh, they must be possessed. No, it's got to be a real language. Oftentimes an old one, ancient Greek or an ancient Latin, ancient form of Greek or Latin or an ancient form of Hebrew, but it can be a current one. One exorcist said he was there and the assistant was Polish, I think, and the person certainly did not know Polish and then started spouting, whatever, mean phrases to the Polish priest there. And they, this shouldn't be happening. This person, how did they possibly know Polish? And you've got to, by the way, check into the background. I do know a priest had to look more into the background because this person was well educated in that, and it turned out they did know a number of languages, and even though they, I think, really believed they were possessed, they well might not have, even though they were responding in different languages, but it seemed that they actually knew them by natural means. So that would be the only tricky part of that, making sure this person doesn't actually know that language on their own. If you can be pretty certain of that, and then you can see this person answering and speaking fluently. And it says some facility. It doesn't mean if they can just say hello, that's not a sign of possession. They've got to really know some language that they should not know. How is that happening? Well, again, pretty simply. The devil travels around. He's smart. He knows all languages. It doesn't matter to him whether it's a language from 2,000 years ago or a more recent one, like modern English. He knows them all, and he can, if he's really possessing this person, can manipulate the vocal cords, and out comes this language of whatever the devil wants them to speak. So there's one sign of possession, ability to speak with some facility in a strange tongue, or to understand it when spoken. Kind of the same thing if the exorcist is speaking, if he tries some Latin or Greek, whatever, the person's able to respond. So there are three signs here. Second sign, which I just talked about, the faculty of divulging future and hidden events. So future events, again, not that the demons are looking at the future the way God does, because God sees it all at one time, the devils don't, but making a prediction that human beings should not be able to. The other part of that, future and hidden events, if the person in question who seems to be possessed is able to tell the exorcist things about his past life that there's no way they should know, well, the devil knows that. He's been watching devils are around watching us. We don't want to obsess on that, by the way, but yeah, they get around a lot. So, if the demon's able to tell that priest something about his past life, okay, that'd be an extremely strong sign. Something that from when he's 10 or 15 years old, that there's no way this other human being could know, very strong sign. Third sign, which in my mind is, I don't want to say a weak sign, but just tricky sign. Display of powers which are beyond the subject's age and natural condition. So beyond the age and natural condition, they usually say something physical, the exorcists do. And the movie, of course, that famous scene, the head spinning around, I don't know any exorcist who's actually seen that. Exorcism, I believe, is very rare, and we'll be talking about that, or possession is very rare. And even amongst possession, apparently levitation is extremely rare, so really, really rare. But the exorcists I talked to, actually I don't think I talked to any who said they saw it themselves, but they said secondhand they had talked to an exorcist who had seen levitation. So again, no big deal for the devil to pick a person's body up off the ground. Apparently demons can move objects and treat the human being like an object. So that would be a very clear one. The more common one that the exorcists see, the one that I think is very tricky, is great strength. When a person shows great strength, and they'll say, well, you've got like a small, older, woman, maybe it could be a man, but a woman might even be less strong, less physical strength. And if it's taking 5 people to hold her down, something's going on. I get that. It's just that anyone who's worked for some length of time in a hospital emergency room, trauma center, let's say like St. Francis in Peoria, where I've got a little bit of a mental health background too, and very providential, the hospital where the bishop had me moved a few years ago, I don't think he even knew it at the time, this hospital was just becoming part of OSF. It's got an inpatient mental health unit. It's the only hospital in all the 8 or 9 hospitals of OSF that has an inpatient mental health unit. So it's a great fit for me to be there with a mental health background now. But anyone who's worked in those things for some length of time has seen how hard it is for a few sane people, even if they're big and strong, if they're in their right mind, you get one person who's small and not that strong, but they're not in the right mind, by that, they don't care if they hurt themselves or anyone else. Well, it can take a lot of people to hold them down. It's very, very sad. It breaks your heart because it's very clear this person's not in their right mind. And what can you do? You've got to restrain them and then get them a shot of some meds to help them calm down. So very heartbreaking. But we don't want to say, gosh, there they are, possessed. Well, no, let's slow down a little bit here. it would be a matter of degree, wouldn't it? How many people and how weak should this person be? I just find that one difficult. Exorcists have to take it into account. It's there in the ritual, but it's just a difficult one. A fourth sign that's not listed with those three, but it comes out a couple times in the rite, and that is a negative reaction to the sacred. In other words, a negative reaction to holy water, the crucifix, or to relics. Those things are mentioned throughout the ritual, that the exorcist can use those, particularly those three things. He should have holy water, he should have a crucifix, and should have relics. So, by the way, those are good things for all of us to have. The relics might be a little bit more difficult to have. Certainly everyone can have crucifix, in every room if you want, and certainly keep holy water around. I know some workplaces you can't put a crucifix, I guess. Take your holy water, sprinkle it every day, and then you've got, no crucifix, fine, sprinkle holy water around. Through the talk, I'll probably kind of downplay the danger of the devil. Only we can downplay the dangers of the devil if we're doing what we're supposed to do. Make sure we're praying. Make sure we have a crucifix up in the house that's blessed. And make sure we have holy water. I've got it in my pocket. I have it at the hospital all the time. It was Father Ripperger that mentioned that. It's like when I first was at the hospital, I wasn't carrying that with me and sprinkling on people, whether mental or physical problems. And he mentioned it. I thought, gosh, I should be doing that. Make sure we're doing the things the church gives us, that Jesus Christ gives us through the church, and then we don't have to worry. If we're not doing those things, if we're putting ourselves in occasions of mortal sins, and we're not praying, we better be pretty scared of the devil then. Unfortunately, the ones who are doing those things might be the ones who are least scared, and sometimes the people who are doing the most things to protect themselves can get too worried about it. So make sure we're doing those things. That's Jesus Christ protecting us. Guess who's going to win? The devil's not. So that fourth sign, again, extremely tricky sign, that revulsion to or negative reaction to sacred things, extremely tricky because one exorcist said, he said about maybe 3 or 4 people a day either call him or talk on the phone. This is kind of making 2 points here on how rare exorcism, how possession, how rare it is. He said maybe 3 or 4 people a day, every day of the year. I said, are you sure you're not exaggerating? That's over 1,000 a year. He said, oh yeah, over 1,000 a year, because his name is out there. It's even on his diocesan website. He said, oh yeah, over 1,000 people a year. And I said, so how many of those do you think are truly possessed? And I'm thinking, it looks to me like he's adding up. 1 or 2. So you get that many people, and I don't mean to make a joke at all of it. It shows us how exaggerated it is. But that means he's got 1,000 people who either think they are possessed or their family member or friend thinks they are. Now, some of those might end up being some lower level thing, but a lot of them are people who are mentally disturbed who think it's a devil. And so, if you've got someone who thinks they're possessed, and you say, well, let me take out my holy water, and now I'm going to sprinkle it, well, of course they're going to react negatively. Or if you hold up a crucifix, if they believe they're possessed, they're going to react negatively. So exorcists will just do maybe some kind of subtle things, that maybe, I don't want to say I'm giving away secrets, but just, you could probably think of some ways, well, how would I have that holy water, crucifix, or relic around, but not let them know it, and would they react? So that's a little bit subtle. I find that one almost like, well, what's a good phrase? I know it's not a good phrase, icing on the cake one. If they really are possessed, yes, they really will react negatively to the sacred, but to just go on that alone is not very helpful. So once you know they're possessed, yeah, that is going to happen as well. They're going to be reacting throughout the ritual. The exorcists all say that they react when the ritual is going on at certain different parts. By react, maybe screaming, maybe cursing, maybe disgusting things like spitting or even vomiting, those kind of gross things, laughing sarcastically and making sarcastic comments. Those are some ways that the person can react. Ritual is numbered, and this is the way it's numbered in this book, which is not necessarily the way it would always be numbered, depending on your version. Oh, I should mention something too. I said 1614. A new rite of exorcism came out in 1999. It was the last of all the rituals of the church to be finally revised post-Vatican II, and it was promptly revised and again in 2004. So the 1999 version did not last long. The exorcists, I don't want to make it sound like I've talked to hundreds of exorcists. I don't know, maybe 5 or 10. So I've talked to some, but not lots and lots. None of them, and I've read some things too from others. None of them that I've seen use the new one. The American bishops just this year are submitting it to Rome for the English translation. Some of them don't like it because it doesn't sound as authoritative. Some just like the old ritual, and some think it won't work as well. much as, I do the old Mass, I love the old rituals of all kinds. I've seen the new one also, and yeah, it doesn't have the same commanding sound. But I liked what this exorcist said, who again uses the old ritual. He said that another exorcist told him, "Oh, the demon said you can't use the new rite on me. That rite is whatever, no good or something." And the exorcist I'm talking to said, "Well, I told him he lies. Why do you believe him?" So yeah, the devil, you can't just believe him because, well, that's not going to work. Oh, really? Well, thanks for telling me. No, you can't believe him. So I like to think there are two sides of it. A ritual, what makes it, what gives it the power, not the exact wording, it's that it's a ritual of the church, and that means it's Jesus Christ. I give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. What you hold bound on earth shall be bound in heaven. What you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So when we've got a ritual of the church, that's the power of Jesus Christ. That's what makes it happen. The Mass, a lot of us here like the Latin Mass. In English, I don't think we get kind of a little bit less of the body of Christ by doing, no, if the church says this is the approved translation, this is Mass, this changes the bread and wine of Jesus' body and blood, then it does. I personally think the Latin Mass is much more beautiful than that, but I'm not going to say, and the Eucharist is a lot better there too. No, that's a horrible thing to say, right? It's the Eucharist either way. So, same thing with the rite of exorcism. However, here's the however with this. This is not a sacrament. This is a sacramental. So that does make a difference. It can make a difference. There have been saints who have been able to drive out demons just by their own prayer. A saint, just by making up the words, can't change the bread and wine of Jesus' body and blood, right? It doesn't matter how holy this saint is. He needs to follow the church ritual or it's not going to change, correct? That's because that is a sacrament. This is not a sacrament, this is a sacramental. So it's a very powerful prayer. It does have the authority and the power of the church. But if you've got a really holy person, they might be able to drive out the demon just by their prayer to God because of their great holiness. So in other words, when a priest gives a blessing, I can be a priest who's a great sinner and the blessing still has some power because I've got the sacrament of holy orders. But I'll tell you right now, if you get the choice between me giving a blessing or a great saint, take the saint's blessing, because even if it's not a priest, he's more holy than me, and really his prayer is more powerful. So you see, sacraments are one thing. That's why we put them in a separate category, because they are so powerful by inherently. You can have the priest who's the worst sinner in the world, and when he says the words of absolution, he has absolved the person's sins. Right? We all know that's how powerful the sacraments are. Sacramentals, they have some power, but a person's own holiness enters into it too. So God answers prayers. So an exorcist who likes the old ritual can make the case that, hey, the old ritual said more commanding things to the devil. Maybe God's just going to honor those more commanding statements, whereas the new rite seems to be not quite as tough on him, and so maybe God's just honoring what we're saying. So, but I would stick with this fact that the church rituals are going to work. As one exorcist said, a lot of what the rite is doing is insulting the devil. So the rite is made up, I won't go through it too much at all. It's made up of gospel readings and psalms, so some basic scriptures, obviously. It's got a number of prayers, and then it's got the word exorcism can have different meanings, by the way. Kind of a broad sense, anytime we're praying or anything about driving away or protection from the devil. I think that's how the Catechism defines it. I know at least one exorcist said that's too vague a definition. True, but it was just giving the most wide definition. A more narrow definition would be an exorcism is words spoken to the devil, which I don't recommend. The only time I do it is when I'm doing a baptism in the old ritual, and there are exorcisms in there. They're called minor exorcisms, and the priest is saying, "But you, O demon, depart, for the judgment of God has come." So any priest can use that old ritual of baptism, and he speaks directly to the devil. In the more narrow sense, that's what an exorcism is, when you're speaking to the devil. So when we say the rite of exorcism, we're talking about the ritual in which the priest speaks directly to the devil. "I cast thee out, unclean spirit." And he goes on, and this is what that exorcist was talking about. "For thou art the carrier of death, and the robber of life. Thou art the shirker of justice, and the root of all evil, fomenter of vice, seducer of men." So it goes on and on, really, insulting him, saying, here's who you are, identifying him, because we know that's a powerful thing, isn't it? Identifying someone. Well, we're identifying the devil with all these things about him, all these evil things So the rite mostly goes through prayers, scripture readings, and 3 times it does those. The priest is speaking directly to the devil. I'll get into, kind of winding down here, I'll get into deliverance prayers a little bit here. The ritual tells the priest that throughout the rite of exorcism, he can say the Lord's Prayer and the Hail Mary and the Creed. It appears to mean, it says the Creed, and then later on it gives the Athanasian Creed. So if you want a longer version and a neat version of the Creed, you can read the Athanasian Creed. But right off the bat, I would say, oh, deliverance prayers. What are the best deliverance prayers? Well, I guess since the rite of exorcism, an official church ritual, tells the priest, use the Our Father, a Hail Mary, and Creed, I bet those are pretty powerful deliverance prayers. So those were where I would start. There's then, maybe I'll get into the kind of the in-between thing. So that's I talked about temptation, talked about possession. I pretty well covered what to do about each one. Well, possession, I guess if you think someone's possessed, well, this is where we're going, those middle ground. Is there a middle ground between it? Exorcists and others will often talk about obsession and oppression. Look it up in the catechism. Oh, it's not there. Well, find the church ritual on how to, there is no church ritual. Well, how about deliverance? What does the catechism say? It doesn't. Where's the ritual for doing deliverance? There is not one. So I'm not saying those things it's wrong to use those words, but be very careful if someone is trying to be too authoritative. Now, let me tell you all about what obsession and oppression is, and here am I going to tell you about it. But anyway, I'm going to try and be very vague, like here's what some opinions are. And same thing with deliverance. Well, so obsession, oppression, kind of like if by possession we mean the demon is possessing a person's body. Well, obsession doesn't mean the person is obsessing on something, although they might. Obsession generally, what the exorcists generally mean by using that word, and it's a handy word, to say, well, the devil hasn't possessed their body and moving their vocal cords. He seems to be obsessing on their intellect or on their brain, whatever, however they do it, putting ideas obsessively. The devil can always give us ideas, right? Anyone gives us ideas. We can drive down the street and see billboards giving us bad ideas. Don't blow all your money on the boat, right? So anyone can give us a bad idea. And the devil, that's all. When children ask, I don't like to scare them. What's about the devil? So you know any kid in your neighborhood or in your class or whatever that's giving you a bad idea? Yeah? Well, that's all the devil does. You don't have to listen to him. You don't have to do it. Just say, God, help me not to listen to those bad ideas. That's all he can do to you. Can he possess you? Yeah, as one exorcist said, you don't wake up one morning possessed. You build a relationship. I'm kind of straying, but I better mention those 3. And the exorcists I talked to all had different words for all the exact same 3 things. One is dealing with the occult. We can open ourselves. They say opening a door. It doesn't mean everyone who does this, oh boy, you're going to be possessed. No, but it's still a really dumb, foolish, and sinful thing to do. Most important, mortally sinful, to deal with the occult. To start talking to a Ouija board or go to the psychic. God's not going to talk through a psychic for $10 an hour or speak to you through the wood and plastic of a Ouija board, because that's all it is. The devil, he'll use anything to drag your soul down to hell. Sure, he'll use a psychic. Sure, he'll use a stupid board and plastic piece. If he can get you to hell with it, he'll be glad to do it, I'm sure. Now, how often does he, possess someone who does those things? Probably very rarely. Still don't want to do it, right? Because it opens a door and makes it possible. So that's one thing, dealing with the occult, worshiping false gods, that kind of thing. A second open door would be patterns or habits of mortal sin. I remember asking an exorcist, well, gosh, lots of people sin. He said, right, lots of people repent too, thanks be to God. He said the danger is building that relationship with evil. Here's my mortal sin, and I kind of like it. In fact, I like it very much. And in fact, I have no intention of repenting. And after a while, I start, what does the Bible say, hardening the heart? I don't even think it's a sin anymore. It's okay. Okay, dangerous path to go down. Even if you don't end up possessed, you can end up in hell. So, dangerous path to go down. But it does, again, of course the devil likes people who are embracing mortal sins and not repentant. It's a no-brainer. So that's another open door. And then the third one, which seems horribly unfair to me, but I understand it, they all say like to be a victim of terrible trauma or abuse can lead to that. And I said, well, whoa, you're talking about an innocent victim here. And they all said, yeah, it's not the being the victim, but what can happen? Those are just heartbreaking. We all know people who've gone through very difficult things as children or whatever. Jesus said the importance of forgiving. We have to try to forgive, at least make an attempt to forgive. Because otherwise what we can get stuck on, as one said, we can get caught in those negative emotions of hate, revenge, you name it, all negative emotions. If we're hanging on to them for years and years and years, yeah, the devil probably likes that, and that probably is attractive to him. So sometimes when people, if I write another book, I'd like to do it on forgiveness, if I just can learn how that can be done. Because someone goes through some terrible things, it's very difficult to forgive. So I usually start by saying, well, do you hope that person goes to hell? And sometimes they say, you want to know the truth? Yes, I do. And I say, okay, we'll start with that. But a lot of times they say, well, no, I don't want them to go to hell. Okay, good. Then in a sense, you've already forgiven them. You don't want them in hell, so what you're telling me is you want them eventually to get to heaven? Well, yeah, I hope so. Well, good. That's really almost a whole ball of wax as far as forgiveness. Now we got to talk about trying not to think about the anger and dwell on all the bad things that were done. But that's a huge start if you can hope that someday that person gets to heaven. If they say, no, you want to know the truth? I hope they're in hell someday. Well, let's think about that and talk about that and try to get to a point where we don't hope that anymore. So those are not in the ritual, but those I just kept hearing from exorcists. Doors that open a person to possession. And probably none of those are, well, the first two aren't surprising. The third one a little bit surprising. But if we think about it in terms of, even if we've been hurt badly, we can't hate. That's an open, that the devil likes that, so we've got to resist it. Okay, so back to those middle grounds. Obsession would be like a demon. He's always giving us bad ideas. I'm sure he's doing that a lot of times. Like I said, that little whispering snake in the Garden of Eden was giving bad ideas. Obsession would be maybe like those young women with the anorexia, just keep like pounding in a person, the idea that they can't get it out of their head. How do you separate that from a person who's obsessive compulsive, just a mental disorder? I don't know, and I've got this fancy degree in mental health, and I've talked to a number of exorcists, and I'm still not sure. So my advice is always make sure you're doing the right thing for both. It's not that unusual for me to be on that mental health unit and someone to tell me either they're seeing demons or hearing demons or having repeated nightmares about demons. I'm sorry to hear that. We're going to say a prayer here and I'm going to sprinkle holy water. What's your prayer life like? Because people in this unit average stay is less than a week. Do you take time to pray each day? Well, you got to make sure you're doing that. Do you go to a church? So we'll talk about making sure in case it really is demonic. I don't know that it is or is not. So we talk about that. And then, but I'm not going to say definitely is, because that's the last thing someone needs who's got a mental disorder and thinks they're seeing demon stuff. I don't want to say, my gosh, I'll bet you do have demons. Great, now I've just confirmed for them that they've got demons. So because they're not fools, they are on a mental health unit. So after I've talked about the spiritual, I'll also say, and I don't know what because I usually don't know the specific diagnosis. I'm not sure exactly what you're on the floor here for, but you're having some kind of a mental and emotional struggle, right? Well, I wonder if this demon thing is part of that. So why don't you make sure you're talking to a counselor and see if the doctor can help you maybe with some meds. I'm not a big one on pushing meds. I'm not one who tells people don't take meds. Follow the ritual, as a priest should do. This is in the instructions to the ritual. The exorcist should guard against giving or recommending any medicine to the patient, but should leave this care to physicians. Good advice, coming again from the evil, stupid Catholic Church of the 1600s. That's pretty forward thinking, isn't it? They knew there were medicines around. The ancient Greeks had medicines that they hoped would help with mental health, and some probably did. Some calming herbs and things like that. So the church knew that. They're just saying to the exorcist, not me, the exorcist, but even to me as a priest, you don't know about that. That's not your field. Don't be giving or recommending them. So I don't. I just, are you taking meds? Are they helping? Oh, we'll keep taking them. You're not taking meds? Well, go get some. No, I don't do that. I just stick with the one. Oh, you are? Oh, is it helping? Oh, it's not helping? Well, make sure you let the doctor know it's not helping. I'm not going to get involved in that. I don't know meds. And plus I've got the church telling me what to do about that. So, so you can see that's where I come from on that. If I guess there's one main point, and I didn't have any great revelation in the book or in the talk about how to make that distinction, I'm pretty adamant that it is, unless I see those and I want to show me the money, you're the devil, then don't just give some bad. If I'm going to believe in possession, I want to see something dramatic of those signs that are in the ritual. The devil can do those, and that's what the church says. So I want to see something pretty dramatic before I believe possession. Otherwise, is the devil involved? Certainly could be, and certainly could be mental health, so I want to make sure this person is addressing both. The other kind of in-between thing some exorcists talk about is oppression. And again, it's like the word sounds, which is why they use that word, some kind of attack from the outside. St. John Vianney is one that's always pointed to. Apparently some outward attacks, and some of these desert hermits of the early church, apparently the devil was physically attacking them from the outside. Pretty rare, I'm sure. But some use the word oppression for that. I guess that would be, I don't hear of that much. We hear more of the obsession thing about the mental problem. But I guess if someone's getting attacked from the outside, well, same thing, prayer and fasting, just keep up what we know we should do. I came up with these as I was writing the dissertation. One of the members of the committee said, you've come across something here, make sure you really stress this. When I came across, there are a few books in the English language written firsthand by exorcists. Father Fortia, who's Spanish, but it's translated into English. Father Eitenauer is American, that was written in English. Father Amorth is written in Italian and translated to English. They all seem to come across more cases of possession than some of the exorcists who I talked to. So I came up with this thing, kind of the wide approach and the narrow approach. Two terms that I did just make up. I had to come up with something. The wide approach is more wide on seeing the signs, like they would put much more emphasis on the negative reaction to the sacred. Some of those priests, such as Father Amorth, who I'm a little bit critical of, not in a mean way, just like, here's what he said, and this seems difficult to me. The priest from Italy, from Rome, he would do what some of them call a diagnostic exorcism. Well, I see this person, they've got some problems that are unexplained, physical and spiritual, so we're going to do the exorcism repeatedly and see if that makes the devil show himself. Well, others would say that the ones I talked to said, no, that's a nuclear weapon. I'm not going to use the rite of exorcism until I am certain of it. So I kind of, as I told you, I kind of prefer that approach. Now it's interesting, the new ritual in the instructions goes a step further than the old. It says that the exorcist should have moral certitude before he does the exorcism. Meaning, what does it mean? It's a little bit vague, but moral certitude, he should be pretty certain. He shouldn't just be doing it as a diagnostic tool. Well, I don't have any idea if this person's possessed or not, so I'm going to do the ritual. The old ritual, that was one, I guess, legitimate way of using it. If you were appointed exorcist by your bishop, I don't know any priest, good, bad, in his right mind or not, who would do the rite of exorcism without his bishop's approval. I've never run across a priest who thought that would be a smart thing to do or would be willing to do it. So the priests I'm talking about, the exorcists, were all with approval of their bishop. But so there's this wider approach that seems to see more people possessed, seems to be more willing to use the rite, and also in my reading and talking, it seems to take them a lot longer. Father Amorth, one of the difficulties I had with his approach, the Roman priest, he said he would go for years sometimes, seeing a person like once a month for years, and even then never resolve it. The priests I talked to in person would say, usually 2 or 3 sessions, maybe 10, but it doesn't take that many sessions. Well, why? Maybe, so I'm thinking, Father Amorth, maybe that person wasn't possessed at all. Maybe that was a mental health problem that you kept using the ritual on every month for years, and it really was a mental health problem. I don't know, I wasn't there. It just says, kind of my radar goes up and think, maybe that's not the problem then if it's not working. And if you've got these other exorcists saying, oh no, when I'm certain it's possession, I do 2 or 3 sessions. By session, I mean, they usually don't drive out the devil the first time they go through the ritual. They might spend a half hour, an hour going through it, and then ending the session, and come back and see me, whatever. They come back in a few days or a week or whatever. It might take 2 or 3, it might take 10 or 12. The priest I talked to said, 10 or 12 is kind of usually, doesn't take any more than that. It could be done in 2 or 3. So you can kind of see the difference in these 2 approaches of exorcists. And that's what I bring out in the book too, and I come down on the side of the more narrow ones, the more cautious one. Part of that is because I'm a little bit skeptic, and but also my mental health background. Because I see things that are really, I'm not a big one on, you could see it in their eyes. I've seen really, and you probably have too, really scary people. That look scary. One guy I remember seeing years ago in the hospital, it was frightening me, he couldn't speak because of whatever was going on, and just this, oh my gosh. Well, he was still under the effects of anesthesia, even like 24 hours later, or whatever. A few days later, I've been talking, he's the kindest, soft-spoken guy, he had some drugs in him, so you've got to be really careful saying, it's a demonic look. Well, it wasn't. It was some anesthesia in him that hadn't gotten out of his system. So very careful in the demonic, they looked like it. And the feel of it, the ritual doesn't anywhere in there tell the exorcist to have someone who is, someone told me they're a discerner, and they can discern the number of demons and the names, and if the person's possessed. I'm not saying that cannot be done. A few, very, very few saints have done it, and I've met a number of people who say they can do it. Well, the rite doesn't say anything about that. And the wider approach, that's another thing they generally like to have some of those people around. The rite doesn't say you cannot. But the other priests just say, well, no, the rite doesn't say that. I just follow it. And they'll usually have a couple people there. The rite does say, by the way, it's the only thing it says about having anyone present. And this is great. This is from, gosh, wish we had a culture like this still. While performing the exorcism over a woman, he ought always to have assisting him several women of good repute who will hold on to the person when she is harassed by the evil spirit. These assistants ought, if possible, to be close relatives of the subject, and for the sake of decency, the exorcist will avoid saying or doing anything which might prove an occasional evil thoughts to himself or to others. Isn't that neat how careful the church was to say nothing improper is going to happen there? So if it's a woman who they think is possessed, we'll have, what's it say, 2 or 3, several women. So that's all it says. So we can presume the same thing for men, obviously. You're going to have several men there to help restrain a man if necessary. But it doesn't say anything about have someone there who can discern the evil spirits. It doesn't say anything about that, so the exorcists are open to do it or not. But it cannot be said to be necessary. Those who use it say, well, it's open to it, and it certainly is, so I don't mean to say they're doing something wrong at all. I thought that made me think about something else in the right. Again, Father Amorth, I'm not just picking on him, it's just he's got a book and he goes into detail on his exorcisms. Talks about like conversations. At one point he recommends to be careful not to say or ask too much of the demon, but then he gives examples of when he did or when his mentor did, Father Candido. But here's what the ritual says. The exorcist must not digress into senseless prattle or ask superfluous questions, such as are prompted by curiosity, etc. Instead, he will bid the unclean spirit keep silence and answer only when asked. Isn't that great? And then necessary questions are, for example, the number and name of the spirits inhabiting the patient, the time they entered into him, the cause thereof, and such like. So, how many demons are, how many demons are in there? What was the rest of it? The time, and the cause. How did you get in? Because if you can then, I don't know if it's something, well, a little bit later on. Just keep thinking of things to add to this talk here. It mentions to burn if the exorcist comes across some kind of a charm or amulet is how that word is usually translated. Here it is. He shall command the devil to tell whether he is detained in the body by necromancy, some kind of a curse or spell, by evil signs or amulets, some kind of charms or something. Now we can say, wow, all those things have such power. One exorcist again told me, he said, do not put too much power on those. A charm or something like that, what is it? Well, it's probably made of wood or ceramic or glass or metal, who knows what. Well, that in itself isn't dangerous. It can become dangerous if used by the devil, and who knows, demon psychology, why would they stay attached to an object? I don't know, but it seems they sometimes do. So the ritual says that should be burned. He should expose them, and when discovered, they must be burned. That's one, by the way, that is found in a person who's possessed. Do not think you've got to burn every single object that you think might have a curse. I mean, what if, that could be ridiculous. Suppose someone is thinks they're a witch or whatever, and, okay. Well, what if they walk down the street cursing every house? No, darn, we got to burn the whole neighborhood down to, it gets silly. Of course we're not going to do that. Sprinkle holy water in every house? Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. Or say a prayer? Sure. But we don't want to give the devil too much power. Father Amorth talked about someone who touched one of those and didn't wash his hands with holy water and got sick for 6 months. Okay, I don't know. You can see how cautious I am on giving too much power to the devil. Yes, the devil really can do things, but we've got prayer, we've got holy water, we've got crosses, we've got sacraments. We're going to win if we're doing what we're supposed to do, because Jesus is working through us. So that was the part I wanted to mention too, because I've gotten a few emails from people. What do we do with these things? I say, have a priest bless it, and if not that, then at least sprinkle water up, holy water. It's been things that they suspected might have been used for evil or whatever. And then don't worry about it, which is what the priest told me, and then quit worrying about it. Let me end here, and that's, we're 10 after, okay. There are 3 parts to the rite. I've quoted from the instructions, that's part 1. I've quoted from the rite of exorcism, that's part 2. The third one was added. They're sometimes called the prayers of Leo the 13th because he added it. Remember, I keep saying 1614 for the rest of the rite. Leo the 13th added this. I don't know the date. Late 1800s. Exorcism against Satan and fallen angels. Again, it's supposed to have the priest is supposed to have the bishop's authority and approval to use it, but it's more for the. We don't call it a possession if a devil is attached to a place or a thing. They usually call it infestation, just to separate it from possession. So a haunted house, what is a haunted house? Probably a devil there, right? It seems to be on these. Can the devil be attracted to places where there's a tragedy? Sure, I don't know why the devil gets attracted to certain things or whatever. So if there's a terrible murder or something in a house, would that attract him? Maybe. So should you have it blessed? You should have it blessed anyway, so do that. And it could a house be haunted? If by that we mean the devil in there doing weird, goofy things to distract attention, to get people to make Ghostbuster TV shows instead of going to Mass and confession, sure, he'll probably do that. He probably does that. So I think that is some demonic stuff there. I think most of it's nonsense and made up and imagined. But when it's real, then it's really from the devil. Human souls from hell, great disagreement on whether they come back and do things. Why a soul? I can't imagine any reason why a soul in purgatory would come to a house and flick light switches or throw things. I can't imagine that. So could a soul from purgatory come back and do some good deed for someone? That may be, I don't know. But I wouldn't attribute souls in purgatory to doing weird things in a house. That's got to be from hell. God doesn't do weird things. Souls on their way to heaven don't do weird things. Demons, souls in hell, yeah, maybe they do. So there's a ritual that Leo the 13th added for driving the demons out of a particular place or a thing, whichever we want to call a house. Is it a thing, a place? It's both. The Bishop of Springfield, when Illinois a year or two ago passed a law for, was it gay marriage law? I think it was the gay marriage law, that on that day, and he announced in advance that he was going to be doing that set of prayers, and of course the media made fun of him. He explained it, he was very careful, he said the ritual is great, because he quoted from the instruction of it. He used the new ritual, by the way, but still, it said, for when the devil seems to be attached or attacking a particular place, he says this is what we got on in the state of Illinois. And again, he wasn't saying, and all you legislators are possessed. Sometimes I think the devil is really hard at work. Other times I wonder if he's just sitting back laughing when we've got a bunch of politicians making up a new marriage definition of marriage. What does the devil have to do? He might just be sitting down laughing. He might not have much work to do. In the end, I think it's always back to the same thing, that little whispering voice. So for those politicians, it's what is it, fame and fortune? Boy, you're going to be popular. Go ahead, vote with it. Just that little whispering serpent voice, I think, is what we've got to be worried about. I better end there.